Amber Heard is probably the most infamous example of how fast a career can fail. For a while, Hollywood painted her as the rising star. Aquaman, fashion campaigns, the works. But then came the courtroom circus with Johnny Depp, and overnight, Heard went from actress to public villain. The trial didn't just expose messy details of her personal life, it cemented her reputation as dishonest in the eyes of millions watching live streams like it was a sport. Instead of bouncing back, Heard doubled down, leaning into the symbol role, claiming she was silenced and targeted. But studios don't like baggage, and the public had already picked their side. Warner Bros. Quietly cut her role in Aquaman 2 down to almost nothing. Now, her name carries more heat than box office pull. Heard's story shows what happens when scandal overshadows talent. Once people believe you're fake, every comeback looks like spin. Brie Larson is the textbook case of how Hollywood hype can backfire. She was launched as Marvel's Golden Girl, handed Captain Marvel with the expectation she'd become the new face of the franchise. But instead of fans rallying around her, Larson's interviews rubbed people the wrong way. Her comments about not wanting white male critics reviewing her movies turned into a viral backlash, and suddenly, Captain Marvel wasn't about superheroes, it was about culture wars. Yes, the film made money, but a huge chunk of that was Marvel's machine, not Larson's star power. By the time the Marvels came around, the box office cratered, and she became the face of Marvel's decline. Larson still has an Oscar and undeniable acting chops, but in the eyes of audiences, she's not a draw. She's a lecture. When fans think of woke Hollywood, her name comes up first, and that's not a place any actor wants to be. Kristen Stewart has lived with the Twilight shadow for over a decade, and when she finally tried to reinvent herself, Hollywood backed her, but audiences didn't. After the vampire craze, she moved into art house films, picking projects critics loved but moviegoers barely noticed. Then came her big studio comeback with Charlie's Angels in 2019. The film was marketed as a feminist reboot, but Stewart's performance, combined with the movie's messaging, was blasted as trying too hard to be political rather than fun. The result? A $55 million production that flopped with just $73 million worldwide. A disaster for a supposed franchise relaunch. Stewart's acting career didn't end there, but it proved a clear pattern. When a movie leans on activism instead of storytelling, it fails to connect. Now, Stewart is respected in indie circles, but she's nowhere near the blockbuster star Hollywood once promised. And for studios, that's a major red flag.
Charlize Theron once had the kind of career most actresses only dream about. An Oscar win, massive blockbusters, and a reputation as one of Hollywood's most versatile stars. But then came her pivot into message-driven action roles. In Atomic Blonde in 2017, she tried to launch a female-led spy franchise. It was stylish, but didn't spark much interest beyond critics. Then she anchored The Old Guard on Netflix, heavily marketed as a progressive superhero story. It buzzed for a week and then disappeared. Her biggest stumble was The School for Good and Evil in 2022, a heavily hyped Netflix fantasy film that critics tore apart for prioritizing representation over sensible storytelling. Despite Theron's name, it failed to make an impact. Now, Theron is still respected as an actress, but her recent projects show a clear shift. Her star power doesn't guarantee box office anymore, and Hollywood is realizing that even A-listers aren't immune when politics overshadows entertainment. Mindy Kaling built her reputation as the witty writer-performer from The Office, and later as the star of The Mindy Project. She had a unique voice and a growing fan base. But in recent years, her projects have leaned so heavily into representation first, story second, that audiences have tuned out. Her Netflix show Never Have I Ever had initial buzz, but it quickly became more about box-checking than strong writing. Then came Velma in 2023, a reimagining of the classic Scooby-Doo character. Instead of clever humor, it offered endless identity-based jokes and overt political messaging. Critics panned it, and audiences outright rejected it, making it one of the most negatively reviewed animated shows in years. Kaling's problem isn't talent, it's priorities. By putting ideology before storytelling, she's alienated the exact audiences who once found her relatable. Hollywood keeps giving her projects, but the public reception keeps proving that woke branding can't mask weak content. Elizabeth Banks had all the makings of a Hollywood success story. She was charismatic, versatile, and even moved behind the camera as a director. But her push to frame every project as a statement rather than entertainment has worked against her. Her 2019 reboot of Charlie's Angels is the best example. Instead of selling it as a fun action flick, Banks marketed it as a feminist milestone.
She openly suggested that men might not support the film simply because it starred women, but audiences didn't reject it for being female-led. They rejected it because it wasn't engaging. The film tanked at the box office, losing Sony millions and ending any chance at a franchise. Banks tried to bounce back with lighter projects, but her reputation became tied to that failure. The lesson was clear. If you tell audiences what they should like instead of giving them something they actually do like, they won't show up.
Janelle Monae entered Hollywood with serious buzz. Already a respected musician, she moved into acting with roles in Hidden Figures and Moonlight, both critically acclaimed films. At first, it looked like she was on track to become a major star, but instead of building momentum, Monae leaned hard into using her roles as platforms for political and social messaging. She made her identity and activism the centerpiece of her brand, rather than her acting. While that approach earned her media attention, it didn't translate into box office draw. Take Antebellum in 2020, a film marketed as bold and groundbreaking, but it ended up being confusing and forgettable. Audiences didn't connect, and critics weren't kind. Since then, Monae hasn't been able to land a defining hit role. Her career highlights show the same pattern we've seen before. When the focus shifts from delivering great performances to lecturing audiences, the career growth stalls fast. Rachel was once seen as Hollywood's next golden child. After being handpicked by Steven Spielberg for West Side Story, the industry rolled out the red carpet. She had the voice, the look, and the breakout role that most actresses can only dream about. But instead of capitalizing on that momentum, Rachel quickly alienated a huge chunk of audiences. The real turning point came during the press run for Disney's Snow White. Instead of leaning into the magic of a classic fairy tale, Zegler dismissed the original film as outdated and sexist, saying her version would be more progressive and empowered. While Disney thought this was smart branding, moviegoers saw it as disrespectful to a beloved piece of cultural history. Add in her occasional offhand remarks about not liking certain projects she was cast in, and the backlash snowballed fast. The result? Snow White faced widespread backlash before release, with many blaming Zegler's attitude more than the film itself. In Hollywood, where likability matters as much as talent, her brand has taken a serious hit. Instead of becoming the next Anne Hathaway, she's at risk of joining the long list of starlets whose careers never recover from a messy start. At the end of the day, the fall of these actresses isn't about talent, because most of them are talented. It's about Hollywood losing touch with the people who actually buy tickets. When stars start lecturing their own fans, dismissing beloved classics, or attaching their identity to politics more than performance, audiences push back. And once the public turns, no amount of studio backing can fully save a career. Because in the end, it's not wokeness or politics alone that sink an actor's career. It's arrogance. And Hollywood still hasn't learned that audiences will forgive almost anything, except being talked down to.